First thing I do, fill some of my drink on myself. That's great. All right. Apparently, zero viewers. That's okay. I think that we are going to be moderately successful. We'll see. Previously, I've been trying to chase down a whole bunch of gold medals, which not many people play a set, of course, or well, people play it, but maybe not a lot of people that follow me. That's fine. I have a sim rig here, mostly based on the Fnatic DD with the 8 Newton meter power pack. Nothing special. However, it is something that I've always wanted to do so. And I'm achieving some pretty good time attack times with that. And hopefully, we will be helping those who will eventually maybe be joining the stream with their time tax. So that being said, there's a lot that can be considered when talking time tax. Essentially, we are operating under the same conditions as an optimized racing scenario. And so, what that means is that what racing sims are built off of, I'm an engineer nerd here, they're built off the math of it all. So, a lot of people can understand that in order to be fast, you have to be fast. Like, people who drive fast understand that around a turn you can't do specific things. However, they don't necessarily know why. So we can talk static versus dynamic friction, the circle of grip, all of this stuff. Really get nerdy with it. But essentially, when thinking about these things, it becomes easier to achieve better lap time. And if you don't necessarily want to believe me with that, we can essentially point to the fact that setting sub 1% times is something that I've done as an experiment. That being said, it's hard, but don't get me wrong here. Like, I'm not saying that I can set a sub 1 second or 1% time easily. No, that's not the case. However, if you think about things in a way that is actually considering the math that these sims are built on, then you gain a better understanding of perhaps the intricacies of using the sim, succeeding in the sim. We're not going to be talking about racecraft. You know, racecraft is a whole nother thing. I mean, when you have other drivers in the mix, it's very easy to. I mean, just look at F1. Like, these guys are the best of the best drivers in the entire world. And they still to succumb to the tendency to go slower when in a battle. That is because they're actually watching their opponent and they're reacting legally to their opponent's actions. So that makes them slower than the person that doesn't need to be reacting to any opponent. That being said, I enjoy time attacks. I might be in the minority here, but I really don't like. And if you guys follow the Sim Stewards on Reddit, that oh my gosh, it's so funny because people are just like, "Who's at fault?" And in reality, unfortunately, with no actual skin in the game, money, a lot of people get really petty with the racing, and they'll just slam their car into yours after you pass them, and it gets stupid. And while I like the idea of racing, I'm definitely kind of brushing up on my skills in order to eventually enter sim racing against other live racers. I think it is not necessarily the most important thing to grasp immediately. So, if you want to start sim racing, I would say absolutely start in the time attack. Like, the time attacks can be so fun because essentially what it amounts to is, are you fast or are you not? And there's no better objective proof of that unless you're fast in the time attack. And so, in reality, you can race against other people and you can think you're fast and you can. The stream is crashing. I think. Not good. Okay. There we go. We're back. All right. Where was I? Yeah, you can obviously race against terrible racers and get first place and think you're fast. If you want to do that, just go down to Boondocks or whatever shitty go kart racing track you have and go nuts. No, like brace 10-year-olds. You'll be the king of 10-year-olds. Congrats. But unless you're actually setting lap times that are sub 5%, 3%, 2%, sub 1% of all of those who have participated in a hot lap experience, well, then in reality, I would argue you yourself are not fast. Maybe you're just taking advantage of poor racers and poor racecraft. So this is kind of my passion. I know, for especially for those on YouTube, this is not my main subject of my channel. That being said, I really love sim racing. It is an approachable, easy way to kind of get into motorsports. And essentially, what we'd like to do is develop habits that would benefit us when we are going to eventually do a track day. And so these things are not only for cars. Yes, the principles, um, some of the principles that we're discussing are for cars specifically. However, the um, treatment and management of tires, as well as pressures, essentially um, dynamic friction, circle of grip, all that stuff actually applies almost more so to motorcycles. And this is because, obviously, on motorcycles, you have half the tires. The weight shift is in a linear fashion as opposed to, I guess it is, it can be at angles, but it's still linear. As opposed to a car with four wheels, you have a full suspension. The weight transfer can be a little more nuanced, especially given driver input. However, on a motorcycle, the idea is management of your dynamic friction, especially on the front tire under braking load, by weight transfer as to not shock the traction patch. And it's kind of crazy because in reality, you are depending on a very skinny front tire, and essentially you're depending on your management of that front tire grip patch. And if you shock that patch, I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of like the Moto Jitsu stuff. If you have dynamic friction, it should be transitioned into with slow, steady brakes, which will load the patch with weight transfer to the front. And from there, you need to maintain that same amount of force until you start undoing your lean angle. And so, what that does is introduce more patch, which equals more grip, only under the premise of continued dynamic friction. So, if you suddenly add more throttle, you're going to wash that front tire patch out. And so, these things are actually interesting because if you think about, especially sim racing or just driving in general, you are actually going to be maintaining the traction patch on each individual tire. Um, Instead of two tires, it's four. Um, but your inputs, steering or on motorcycles, leaning with a little bit of counter steer in there, that will actually maintain whether or not you can achieve certain lean angles. Um, it's so nuanced that it gets into maintenance of slip degree. So if I am turning, I mean, if I'm achieving a certain slip degree, there is an acceptable amount, like people say oversteer is faster than understeer. Why? Because your driving tire is actually already technically trying to go ahead of your steering tire. And so what you can do with that is rotate around an apex, because this is all assuming you're under a turn. If you apply the same principles to cars, motorcycles, anything with the same suspension, um, kind of vehicular engineering construction, you can achieve faster lap times or faster operation around a corner with consideration of your traction pattern. So this is the dream. Essentially, I I love to get like super nerdy about these things. I had an excellent professor way back when, at Colorado School of Mines, Dr. Gregory Bogan, and he was in his job, actually multiple jobs, driving up horsepower to fuel consumption efficiency of diesel versus gasoline engines, and then teaching based on his research, and then in his free time, of course, which you have none when you're trying to do such crazy things in your PhD, um, setting records at the local speedway. So this kind of thing is obviously for a reason. You can be fast um, by considering essentially the equations that are underlying your grip. It is dangerous to, I guess, in my opinion, it's dangerous to just kind of go about riding motorcycles or cars in a manner that is uh, pushing it to the limit, finding the steering angle in which you are understeering, or if you're on a motorcycle, if you found that you are going to overcorrect and then high side, or if you are oversteering, of course, especially on a motorcycle, you will slip out the back tire and low side, or have a very dramatic high side after that. So, all of these things, all of the mathematical equations that are built into sim racing are for a reason. These things are calculating dynamic frictions, your circle of grip. It's really all about the circle of grip is dictated by dynamic friction. How can you stay transiting that circle of grip without essentially turning it into a square? Because once you exceed, if I'm accelerating and then steering at the same time 100% accelerating, I guess it'd be down. 100% accelerating, 100% turning, the circle of grip is what that exceeds. So I have it drawn up here in the back. We can get really nerdy about it if you like, but I don't see anyone kind of taking up that challenge as of yet. So I'm just gonna sit here, uh, talk about this stuff because I enjoy this stuff. Had a long week, but still, this is the kind of thing that I like to really just harp on, especially in the um, perspective of safety. Like with the motorcycle, you cannot afford to ignore these things. And essentially, if you are going about riding by going to the extremes, extreme acceleration, extreme braking, extreme leaning, unfortunately, it's only a matter of time before you hurt yourself. And this is where, like, creators like Motojitsu and a lot of the more educators, like Port Port Nine, I think his channel is called. Like, they are actually trying to reduce the number of motorcycle related incident. And it's something that I would also like to contribute to, because the fact is that some of us die every season. It sucks, it's shitty. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. I understand that cars and traffic and crazy circumstances happen, but a lot of the accidents that happen, it was like over 80% of accidents on the motorcycle happen because the motorcyclist ends up hitting someone. And that is for too high of speed, too high of speed differential, or essentially um, overestimating the stopping capabilities of the motorcycle. And that is because your front tire, guys, it's only like that wide. You can walk out to your motorcycle, and that will be at best your entire contact patch if you just put your hand flat on the tire. So we just need to consider all these things. All these things can be leveraged to sim race and achieve faster times. And essentially, it is not. It's not a mystery how to be fast. We'll say that. It's not a superhuman capability. The drivers that are fast, especially in F1 and other racing series, are the way they are because they not only understand the principles of racecraft, which we're not getting into here, but the principles of vehicle dynamics. Vehicle dynamics is pretty much, especially in time attack, how anyone is considered fast. So that's what I was hoping to talk about during this live stream. This is kind of a test, see if anyone wants to watch. I understand that, especially on YouTube, not a lot of people enjoy this type of content, or at least not my current subscriber base. There will be live streams based on the motorcycle as well as maintenance and everything. Really excited to bring that to you. But, excuse me, essentially, I'm just going to be showing you how paying attention to all of the vehicle dynamics can make you faster in time attack. So, let's just get into it. Been talking for way too long at this point. Let's see, like 20 minutes. Oh my god. I would not want to watch myself talk for 20 minutes. So, apologies there. Let's start some music. I'll keep it kind of low this time so that I can walk you through how I am trying to achieve the sub 0.6% time on this Drying the Lake challenge in Assetto Corsa with the Huracan Performante at Laguna Seca. So, get it started. Alright, here we go. We're going to turn up the auxiliary volume on the microphone just a little bit. We're going to turn down the music. This is all a whole lot of fun. Forgive me if this sounds like crap. It should be fine. I think the mic is adequately close. There we go. Excellent. Alright, here we go. Alright, so first thing to consider. In reality, you can have the fastest vehicle that was ever made. We're actually going to turn down the volume on the vehicle, although we'll have to turn it up later for a point that I'm trying to make. Let's see here. we go. And then we're going to do the mixing. Excellent. All right. So I think that should be it. Essentially, when you think about it, guys, the mitigating factor of your speed is and will always be your tires. Essentially, you can have the fastest vehicle in the world, and if you put all seasons that are meant to go 100,000 miles, very hard compound, doesn't really warm up, and its friction coefficient is very low, essentially that's going to dictate your ability to be fast with said tire. So what I'm trying to highlight here is maintenance of your tires, the settings affecting your tires, as well as the contact patch considerations absolutely affect your speed and whether or not you're going to overshoot the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. So that's definitely there we go. That's definitely an aspect of it. Not adjusting your seating positions, another one, but we can certainly get into that another time. Today, I really want to talk about maximizing contact patch, as well as slip angle, and tire temperature. Essentially, we're going to nerd out about tires and dynamic friction. So what I'm going to do in preceding laps, and this is difficult because I think I added myself like pretty much a bingo fuel. We're going to add a little more fuel here. Go back to pits. Go, bear with me. Here we go. Alright. So this is essentially... Oh, I do have 30 liters because I didn't even load the time attack setup. You always gotta load your setup. That's pretty much first things first. However, I am going to go ahead and add about 4 times as much fuel to this. And that is for kind of lapping and telling you exactly how I'm trying to achieve a sub 0.6% lap time at Laguna Seca with the Hurricane Pokemon. So what we're going to do first is set up our tires and our suspension in a way that is maximizing of both contact patch during turning, but also minimizing the amount of friction that the car observes during acceleration. And so that is essentially equating into a couple terms that are associated with your suspension. Maximization of contact patch, especially during the weight transfer of the vehicle around a turn, is what is known as camber. So your camber, when the vehicle turns, is going to flatten out that contact patch, right? So essentially, if I'm cambered from the beginning, it is minimizing that contact patch, the amount of tire that is contacting the ground in a straight line. However, when I turn to that side, the contact patch suddenly becomes greater because the vehicle's weight will shift, and essentially with that camber angle remaining the same, make more of the tire come into contact with the pavement. So that's essentially how you maximize grip. One of the ways that you maximize grip in a turn. Another way, of course, is the consistency of your braking and the turn, so that you can't immediately shock a contact patch, because you go from kind of a localized, this is difficult, a localized kind of static friction state to a dynamic friction state. So how you can think about it is, if you're in a static friction state, we've all experienced this, right? We're trying to push something heavy across a floor, and to get it started is a massive pain in the ass. But suddenly, when it goes, you're able to push a lot harder, or no, your force stays the same, but your effort can decrease, because the dynamic friction of actually getting something moving is lower than its static friction. And so when you think about that in terms of your tire's grip, you have to think about it local. So this is like a discrete function. Think of how traction control is working. A lot of the electronic nannies built into modern vehicles make you faster, because you're actually just embracing the principles of static versus dynamic friction and minimizing the conversion of slip to grip. And the way that it does that typically is it will cut off your throttle. It will transfer power from the inside tire to the outside tire, where there's actually the weight has shifted and your contact patch suddenly is greater. So all of these things are considerations that when you think about and you're racing in a time attack, can make you faster. Of course, this is also when you're playing racing other players. However, it's easier to think about when you're completely alone in a time attack setting, because you can start kind of pushing the principles. So I guess for this first lap, what I'm going to do is shock the suspension. And so that is, I'm going to try to maintain high speeds, and I'm not trying to intentionally make the car understeer. However, I will be turning in at an angle that is abrupt. I'm going to be braking in a profile that is abrupt and accelerating in a profile that is abrupt. So that abrupt application of force essentially overwhelms. We only have 4 contact patches. We only have 4 tires. It overwhelms the ability for that friction of tire to road and will cause slippage. And that slippage will cause the traction control to step in, reduce my amount of throttle. Even though I am fully mashed on the floor, this is going to be a demonstration of how these vehicles essentially mitigate you from killing yourself by spinning out or understeering. And when you work in conjunction with them by giving them a strong but steady application of throttle and brake, you can maximize that friction between the tire and the road by, in conjunction with good suspension settings, maximizing your contact patch. So all of it super nerdy, super heady, but I'm hoping to demonstrate that as part of this kind of sim series. So I'm not sure anyone is watching. If you are, that's awesome. Leave a comment. I think I'm watching Twitch. There's been one gentleman who has subscribed to me on Twitch. Whoever you are, thank you very much. That's much appreciated. I am a young professional working in aerospace at a startup, so it's certainly a little difficult to maintain a consistent streaming schedule. That being said, I think that I have a pretty unique perspective that could help you get faster, could at least interest you in me trying to pursue records as part of the Assetto Corsa, and hopefully Assetto Corsa Evo, which would be really cool. But yeah, here we go. I think we're going to be showcasing the kind of detriment of shocking the system, your suspension, and your tires contact patch on these first laps. Then we're going to go over another technique that is gradual in consideration of throttle and brake profiles. Let's get started. So right away, braking as hard as I can, it overslowed the vehicle. It actually didn't quite... Okay, it's going to be hard to talk about and showcase at the same time. But essentially in the first few corners, what we've done is go from straight line throttle application to hard brake application and turning. So if I'm here, I just, with the squeal of the tires, realized I overcame my localized static friction, and that transferred into dynamic friction. And so essentially the vehicle was sliding, and that equates to understeer, especially when I'm trying to initiate to turn. So here, if I'm braking hard while at the same time trying to turn, I just shocked the whole entire system by transferring all the weight to the front wheels, which means the friction responsible for the tires on the road is exceeding its ability to grip, which causes the understeer. I'm getting a little bit of lag here. I might need to stop and figure that out for one moment. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to shut up and show you a lap that I'm essentially just going to be shocking the system at every turn. Here we go. I can't even... Okay. So as you can see, what's happening is the car is going into a dynamic friction scenario in which the tires lack what most consider to be grip. Well, what most consider to be grip is a localized static friction, and that is the tire's direction dictates the car's direction. Well, you see there, I just completely understeered because I am trying to change the car's direction with a very aggressive input after shocking the system. See there, that's again understeer because I've overcome the tire's ability to grip, and suddenly it catches, and my steering is oriented in a direction where I'm not actually trying to head. And this can be used for fun in the oversteer sense that is known as a drift, which we can certainly get into. But as you can see there, no matter if I'm completely steering the wheel more and more, it's not going to change the direction of the vehicle. That means I am essentially steamrolling the front tires with the power that's originating from the back. So, just like that. And notice how I come off of the throttle and the vehicle's weight evens out, which means that the friction scenario that the tires are seeing at that instant becomes less dynamic and more steady state. Well, then suddenly I feel like I have more grip. And so I'm coming off the throttle and I'm getting more and more grip back as the vehicle's weight sorts itself out. So, but if I'm completely mashing the throttle there, it's funny because I have traction control set at 1, so it's not necessarily going to let me drift. It cuts the power applied to the back wheels. But as you can see, I can actively I can induce understeer quite easily. And this is with the electronic nannies on, and this will absolutely destroy your lap times. Because as you can see, I was almost full lock to the right, but it's not like my turning actually benefited, the direction of the vehicle actually benefited from it. Instead, the vehicle suddenly catches, and the direction that the steering wheel's pointed is where the vehicle wants to go, like this, after that localized static friction is established. So brake and then turn, you can hear it. That's the idea. If you're hearing the squealing of the tires, you're either understeering or oversteering. Both are not optimal. However, if you were to choose one, you would want to set up your vehicle for oversteer, because what you can do with that is rotate about the apex of a turn. And so you can chase the front tires with the back tires around the turn. So in this instance, instead of shocking with massive weight transfer, what I'm going to do is actively try to gradually apply throttle, gradually apply brake. There seems to be some sort of streaming difficulty here. I'm seeing health is excellent, but I'm dropping frames, so apologies if you're watching. Let me see. This should help right here. Excellent. Perfect. So, like I said, for this next lap, we're going to be focusing on braking profile as well as throttle application profile. So a lot of people think, like, in order to be fast, you have to brake hard and then apply throttle early, or apply throttle quickly. Neither of these things are necessarily true. Quickly and hard for brake is a concept that, when done perfectly, is maintaining your circle of grip. And so, let me see, I have it drawn up there. If you'd like, I can certainly show you, but if you think about it, the tires and the friction between the tire and the road can only handle so much force. It's like you take your two hands here and you push down on the one. Well, try to slide it left or right when you're pushing really hard. You can't. However, if you push extremely hard, extremely quickly, well, that's very easy to shear off of that contact patch. So think about your tires as the contact patch, hand to hand, tire, road, and as long as you maintain an even pressure, even if it's very hard, you're going to maintain grip. But the second you apply jerky steering input or extremely jerky braking or throttle input, well, suddenly that's either pushing forward really hard in the case of braking or pulling back extremely hard very quickly in the case of throttle application. These things become far more nuanced, and that's why people say it's a lot harder to be fast in slower cars. So if you take, for example, the MX-5, the Mazda Miata, thinking about these concepts and making sure that you implement them correctly will differentiate you from other drivers in an extreme sense, because essentially you will be maximizing the friction between your tire and the road surface in a way that others are just trying to be fast and braking very hard, accelerating as hard as you can. And Miata's MX-5s don't have the throttle to be braking that traction loose, but they don't also have essentially the weight or the braking capacity to be kind of maintaining extreme friction between the road and the tire. You have to really balance. The circle of grip is actually much smaller. So you think about the grip of a tire being related directly to the suspension geometry as well as your tire choice, air pressure, as well as the heat of the tires and the track surface. These things kind of dictate fundamentally how much grip there is potentially. There's a threshold, right? So if you're on a very cold track, think about it. Okay, we'll think of extremes here. Ice and summer tire. Summer tire needs warm temperatures in order to be pliable, in order to be maximizing the grip that it can achieve, and it requires a hot surface. However, if you have a summer tire that's freezing in the winter and ice, you're gonna have zero grip. This is what especially when F1, like in this latest weekend of F1, what we saw was those using a rain tire were able to far outpace those. Kevin Magnussen was able to far outpace his competitors who were on intermediates, not race-specific tires. So his rain tire, though there has been criticism of current season's rain tires, was essentially optimized for the coolness of the track, the presence of liquid on the track, so dispelling that liquid and maximizing the contact bash. But also, the intermediates were being chilled by the track temperature and the ambient temperature, and thus not able to achieve the same localized friction that Kevin Magnussen was benefiting from. That's why it seemed like he had such massive grip when no one else had any. So this is, again, it's very heady stuff. Like, it's kind of a lot to be thinking about, but essentially that is why, if you remove the driver aspect of it, if you remove your natural tendency to want to overbrake, over accelerate, then suddenly you acknowledge that your circle of grip is only so large, and as long as you reach an extreme of the circle, but then reduce your braking while increasing your turn, your slip angle of your tire is actually going to maintain the same consistent value, which means however you've set up your suspension, that geometry will dictate whether your car is oversteering, understeering consistently. That consistency is what makes you fast. The consistency of that contact patch allows a driver to find the limit, and that is the circle. The perimeter of the circle, the very, very perimeter, is where the fastest drivers reside. If you're extreme braking 100%, but then you're coming completely off the brakes, you go, the weight transfer of the vehicle will come back to neutral if you brake really early. And then you extreme turn, which means the circle goes far right. You're still not going to be as fast as someone who brakes extreme initially and then comes off the brake while the vehicle's weight transfers forward, and then that dive is managed by your suspension setting, and then you're turning in. At the same time, the camber of your outside wheel is leveled out, so you have a better contact patch on the outside. And suddenly, if you're turning while reducing that brake, this is what trail braking is called. If you're reducing that brake just into the turn, you can achieve the utmost grip while completely mitigating your chances of exceeding that grip and going into an understeer scenario. If you are either jerky with the sudden application of steering or sudden with your application of braking. All of these things are absolutely critical to consider. So, in this next lap, what we'll be doing is the gradual application of brake. The sudden application, or the gradual application of brake, and the gradual application of throttle. This still will not be as fast because what we're doing is we are being overly conservative with the grip and the friction achieved by our contact patch. We won't be essentially considering the balance of the steering to braking profile. We're just going to be doing everything gradually. Smooth is, or what is it saying? I forget now. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. It's nonsensical, but in reality, what you can achieve is better grip as opposed to jerky motion. So that's what we're gonna go do at this moment. Oh, it helps if your foot is not on. Oh. If your foot is not on the clutch instead of the brake. We'll get into techniques of that. So I'm gonna gradual gear changes, gradual application of brake, gradual application of throttle. Again, gradual application of brake, little gradual application of steering, gradual application of throttle. So what I'm trying to do right here is be smooth, right? So what I just failed to do was maintain my grip. And essentially, the smooth factor of steering, throttle, steering, come off, go on, there we go. I'm going to gradually apply throttle here, downshift, gradually steering, gradually apply throttle. Essentially, you have to think about all these things in each and every turn as a lifetime, right? So if in your mind you're thinking that everything's going by lightning quick, your reaction speed to all of it is going to be much slower. But if you can discretize every single moment that you're going through a turn, you can think how a computer thinks is like every microsecond means I'm increasing my braking by 1%. Excuse me. Until I hit a point where I'm no longer braking and I'm turning. So during that whole time, my turning is increasing by 3%. So I'm trail braking into the turn, and that is actually happening at a very gradual scale when you think about the 3 seconds it takes you to get around a turn. In your mind, turn that into 1 year. So if we're talking about approaching a turn, your braking starts in January, but it's not over by February. Essentially, you hit it hard 99% in January while your speed is high. You're not going to lock the tires when you have all of that inertia. You're actually going to be spiking your braking pressure, but then that's when the profile comes in. You spike up, and then you gradually decrease that pressure. And so February, you're about 80%. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, March, April, like you are 60%, 40%. May, you're 15%. So it tapers off quite hard. So when you think about, okay, 3 seconds is a year, when you're a third of the way through the year, you're already at 15%. That doesn't give you much time to brake. But the profile of your braking in that limited amount of time dictates how evenly you load that suspension, how you're not shocking your contact patch. So essentially, what you're going to be doing, there we go. What you're essentially going to be doing is getting all your braking done very early with a quick spike and a hard taper. And then you'll be in your steering at that point. You're going to be pretty much full steering to facilitate getting around the corner. You'll still have about 5% brake pressure, which is trail braking, which the fastest do. And then let completely off of your brake, obviously when you've apexed, so June, 6 months into the year, and then slowly start applying throttle. And that is so that you're maximizing your grip. A lot of people say, well, I'm not oversteering, but turn off traction control and tell me that's not the case. Because if I am reaching June, then I'm suddenly mashing on the throttle and I'm still in oversteering, then it's just traction control that's saving my rear end. If I turn that off, my rear end will absolutely step out into immediate oversteer and I'm going to spin out. So consider that traction control works by limiting engine power. And that suddenly puts into perspective, okay, well, if I want to be fast, I'm not going to be limiting my power, which means that I have to limit the amount of throttle that I apply on exit so quickly. So June, July, August, you are leaning into that throttle, but only about 5, 15, 30%. So again, it's a little bit exponential, but as you reduce that steering angle, suddenly you can apply much more. And August to October, you are 80% throttle, like 75 to 80% throttle, with November and December being full send straight out of that corner. So by breaking down each and every turn into a full year of that specific profile with a hard initiation, long, what's the term? Hard initiation, and essentially a decreasing exponentially distribution of your brake pedal. Full turn, you're going to be transiting your circle of grip from hard brake down as you initiate your turn around the circumference of the circle of grip, and then you'll be full turn with neither brake nor throttle, and then as you start uninitiating your turn, then you're going to be applying an exponentially increasing amount of throttle. So think about it like seasonal cycles. I mean, it's kind of funny that's how that works, but essentially you're going to be thinking about every single turn in that same manner, and that's what's going to make you fast. Yes, vehicle setup does play into it. Suspension setup is an art. Some would call it black magic, but it's not. It is an art of controlling the weight that is suspended by your suspension. It's called suspension for a reason. Your weight distribution of your vehicle absolutely comes into play, but your handling of said weight and its transfer in a dynamic setting of braking and accelerating and turning, that is what's going to dictate the dynamics that your tire contact patch is able to achieve. So I really think I've lost just about everyone. I'm not sure if anyone's watching this, but essentially this is all the stuff that I'm thinking about when I'm achieving sub 1% times in these challenges. Like I'm chasing top 0.5% here, and you can't really, that's pretty objective. Like you can't really argue against that. That being said, I'm not a racecraft expert. I am interested in time attacks and maximizing my speed, racing other people and assuming their strategies, and reacting to calamities, reacting to their defensive or offensive maneuvers. Completely different, guys. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I could get on a track and race other drivers and still come out first every time because of a fast lap time. That's not how it works. But I enjoy the dynamics of vehicles, and understanding that is essentially your ground level of becoming faster, even if it is in a scenario of racing other drivers. Once you understand these principles, you're able to understand the underlying factors that are making you faster, not as an individual. Like I said, if everyone else wrecks out and you still win the race, good for you. But that doesn't mean that you are a fast racer. This has gone long, and I still don't see anyone willing to take me up on the racing tutoring, which is fine. I'm testing all of this. Obviously, everyone who has joined and dropped is watching, wondering what the hell I'm rambling on about. But I'm essentially just waiting for someone who's interested in kind of delving into the nerdy aspects of maintenance, of dynamic traction patch of your tires. And yeah, we talked about the motorcycle a little bit earlier on in the stream, how it's actually, all these principles are more important on the motorcycle, and this is why people high side and low side, is because they don't take these things into account even in their daily driving. But that is what it is. And essentially, we are going to be demonstrating that by setting faster and faster lap times. So, we'll turn this into a pursuit of a gold medal here, 0.6% lap time. And I'm going to be talking you through kind of how I'm braking, how I'm accelerating, how I'm turning, and how I'm maintaining my circle of grip. Thanks for tuning in. If you've hopped on, hopped off, I appreciate it. Oh, it does not help to skip frames. Okay, this mic is totally... I'm smacking it. 1 second. Wait. There we go. We're definitely blaming the mic. That was all the mic's fault. I still don't know why I'm dropping frames here. Alright, so we set sub 130 first try. That's fine. It's not great. I'm not saying it's great. It's still... It's 3 second off 0.6% pace. So that's probably about top 10%. Which is... I mean, it's not bad. However, what we're going to do is make sure that our performance looks like we are about 40%. says stream health is good. Trying to figure. Stream health is excellent. Check what other apps we. All right, here we go. So here we're going to be paying special attention to the profile of braking and throttle application. This is immediate 99% braking upon entry, which is approximately like during what you'd call like the straight approach to a turn. So yes, you're obviously going to want to do most of your hardest braking in a straight because you have the vehicle at a steady state. Your suspension is evenly weighted on all of the contact patches. So as I brake harder, that weight transfers forward, and my rear brakes, my rear tires have less traction, and thus it's very easy to overwhelm my front tires contact patch. So I'm going to be coming off the brake, like I said, around the March time, if we're thinking as the turn in terms of 1 year's time. So get all my braking done, 99% of my braking, January, February, and then slowly start coming off March, April, May. In May, yeah, I'm in that 25 to 15% range while maintaining May, June, July 5%, and that's the trail braking that's going to rotate the vehicle, and then slowly start applying its throttle as not to induce the traction. So here we go. I was early on the throttle there. Oh, totally overshot that last. Alright, we made 2 critical errors in that lap. So we underbraked the first turn, which meant we went super far wide. And that is, the profile wasn't as hard as it should have been immediately during the straight section. And so thus I had to maintain stronger brake pressure whilst turning into the turn, because I can't continue to go straight at that same brake pressure, because like I said, the weight will be transferring forward and I'm going to be overcoming the friction that my front tires have. And I just dumped my dumped my mouse. That's fine. It's gonna be a little hard to grab. Okay, we're back. Nope. So like I was saying, what happened was we completely flubbed the profile of the brake on entry into turn 1. We didn't brake as hard as we should have in approach while the vehicle was in a static state, but also we didn't end up coming off the brakes early enough whilst initiating our turn, which meant in our circle of grip we had turned it into a square or rectangle, which exceeded the grip, which meant we understeered. So, in order to mitigate this, I need to hit the brakes harder, faster, and essentially turn in whilst I'm transiting the perimeter of that circle of grip. So, I will showcase that now. Gonna add a little more fuel here. Probably get a couple laps in. Still getting some frame drops on the sim here. I'm not sure why. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna approach this first turn in these largely the same way, except we're gonna come off throttle more gradually there. So what we've done is reduce the lockup of the tires and balance the weight transfer of the vehicle, and thus maximize the contact patch of the tire. So a little grip here. I didn't brake hard enough on the entry of that turn, so I still induced understeer. So that was a really good example of braking on time, waiting to turn in until the vehicle was adequately slowed. And then, excuse me. That was over braking. But essentially, waiting till the vehicle was adequately slowed, the weight of the vehicle was adequately transferred, but not overwhelming. Oh, that's probably why. Okay, here. Shoot. That's what happened. I didn't plug in the secondary camera here. That is why the stream was unstable. That is my bad. Alright. We're gonna start that back up. Always something. That being said, if anyone is watching and they would like for me to transfer tracks or otherwise explain another concept, please simply say so. I would love to talk with you and perhaps help you with something, a challenge that you are struggling with. Action failed. Excellent. Alright, and we're back. Yikes. Didn't break early enough, hard enough. And instead needed to continue braking, inducing understeer whilst I was entering the turn. And so this is why load cell pedals make all the difference. As you can see, I floated my braking and force feedback, throttle, and clutch thresholds on right above my experience here. Because what I want to do is I want to maximize each of those columns while minimizing understeer or oversteer. Now I've built in some oversteer into the vehicle suspension so that I can rotate about the apex of a turn, and when I apply throttle I can do so a little earlier. That's pretty common practice, and it is what most people prefer. Obviously you wouldn't prefer understeer, as I just experienced. Again, experienced understeer because I applied an extreme amount of turn angle without doing so gradually. Yeah, it's just 130. We're 3 seconds off 0.5% pace. So as you can see, for that one, I actually kept the brake at about 90% for the vast majority of the approach to the turn. And so it actually didn't help me at all. It's not that it slowed me anymore, because what happened was the weight transfer went to the front tires and I ended up just understeering as I started to initiate my turn. So in contrast for that one, I actually braked on time and I braked on time and then turned in gradually, but applied throttle too early. And this one I'm talking and I just have no sense of talking and driving. So it is what it is. 1 second. Alright, here we go. It's funny because the title actually makes a lot of difference here. I've been getting in and out when I am essentially saying that I'm going for a challenge, but if I'm in the challenge saying I'm not going for the challenge and I'm just trying to help, it doesn't actually help. Which is counterintuitive, because I thought if I'm saying I'm going to try to help, yeah, there's a lot to it. The streaming / YouTube game is kind of a pain. If Future Me is watching this, cheers, hope you made it. You're gonna have to learn a lot between now and then, so you're gonna have fun doing it though, so there's that. All right, here we go. Don't think twice now, you got things to prove. I'm not playing, I'm not hard to get. 'Cause when I saw you, there was nothing else. You got dreams and I got dreams, so let us open up about it, maybe. I'm dropping frames at the most inconvenient time, I swear. I guess. Yeah, that happens. I'm still really not sure why the frame dropped though. Let me just see. I already achieved a sub 130, which is the bronze medal, if you will, in the top 0.7% of players. So if you're going to criticize whether or not the principles that I'm talking about make a difference, the proof is objective. Because the simulator is built off of these same principles, if you take them into account whilst racing, you're going to be far more successful than you would otherwise. So, what we're going to do, I think, is going to change the strat. We're going to end and then restart the stream. It's like a little A/B testing here because the stream is not super it's not necessarily popular right now. Fine, because this is not a popular time to be streaming. I think we're going to end and then perhaps test another video title, which may help, but I think that the vast majority of views have probably dropped off of the viewership of the topic. Not sure that'll be. I mean, if we are talking 1 or 2 viewers, we're talking 1 or 2% of the total viewers in the entire world, because there's only about 130 last I checked. I'll take that, honestly. Like, I am encouraged by one instance. So it's all about perspective. I think this was a good test. I'm a little surprised by the result, but overall that's fine. It was a pleasure streaming, and definitely looking forward to it. Alright, take care. Peace.